For somebody belonging within an indigenous community, a great degree of trust is also required for that research. It is just not the non-indigenous scholar who needs to have that trust, it is also for the indigenous scholar who needs to have that trust and not to take the community for granted. I think that is a very important issue. Alright. So this is of course Linda Smith's book that we had earlier began with, and this is what she is interested in, is about centering her concerns and worldviews and then coming to know and understand theory and research from our own perspectives and for our own purposes. I would strongly suggest, and I would send it to the CPS email, for young scholars not only to read this book. I don't think it is sufficient. In 2020, it is not sufficient to read this book. It is important to look at the entire journey that this book has involved or has ushered in. And that journey involves scholars from across the globe looking into indigenous studies and forcing oneself to look into it. One needs to understand the anger in the book and the anger that generated agency for many scholars of indigenous studies, many scholars. This is of course, and for example, what you see over here is the Waipapa Mari of the University of Auckland, where I was in 2016, and this is of course a craft ceremony that you will see. I think the Waipapa Mari in the University of Auckland, and I think this is one of the ways of having an agency, to actually have, and this is part of the 90s. Please understand, this is part of the 90s. This is part of the struggles of the 90s that you can see this particular house, and which is a house of ceremonies and other traditions that is brought forward over here. And which becomes very important. To have it within university grounds. The insistence of having a Maori representation within that particular university. And this is true for most universities in New Zealand. Most universities practice cultural sensitivity and understanding. The determination to have a particular base where one can have access to a different knowledge system. How does that happen within the context of India? I think within the context of India, one does not just think in terms of centers within the university, but to actually have such possibilities within it. And within different universities in different regions in India with a strong indigenous population. I think that is a possibility that one can talk about. I'll try to see if this is visual. This is a young that I wanted you all to see. This is not a very great recording. It's done on my cell phone and a very old kind of cell phone, I think. And it's a small dance, and I hope it will really, it's just children dancing the traditional dance from Maori. And I'll see if it is, Maggie, could you please let me know if it is visible and audible? If not, we'll just skip it. I haven't clicked it, I'll click it now. Okay?
Ma'am, it's visible, but your screen has been blinking from the beginning, so can you do anything about that?
Is it visible now?
It is visible, but it's blinking, it's not...
It takes time for some.
Oh, okay.
Is it true for everybody, or are there people who can see it?
Now we cannot see it?
No, I've paused it.
Okay.
I've paused it, so I'll unpause it again, so let me know if you can see it. It's just a 27-second video. Alright?
We can't see the video.
Alright. So I think it was a small one. So what I'll do is I'll try to send it to you later on, and then we can see it later on. So I'll continue with what we're doing. I think that might be easier, right? It will save time as well. Is that okay?
Okay.
Correct. Okay. So the other person that I wanted to talk about is Manulani Alluli Mayar. important, and she is somebody who works with Hawaiian traditions, and it's also interesting where Linda Smith and she have been in conversation for a very long time. In fact, she spent a sabbatical at University of Auckland at the invitation with Linda Smith, and their conversations have been very important. As you can see from the PowerPoint, that she works in the field of indigenous epistemology and its role in worldwide awakening. She insists on knowing the world in terms of Hawaiian epistemology. And this is her book, which is called Ululu, A Time of Beginning, Collected Early Writings. And this is one of the earliest books this is published in 2018. It's a very important book, and if you can see, she speaks about understanding the world according to her ideas of indigenous knowledge. Alright? What's also important, and I think that should be very heartening for all of us over here, is that she also mentions that for the last 10, for the year, she's supervised around 30 PhD dissertations on indigenous studies at the university that she works in. And I think that is very important for all of us as well. What I'll go on now is, because this is at McGill University, and now this is something that is very important for me. You see me very uncomfortable standing next to these very wonderful men. But I need to explain the two contexts over here. This is, of course, as Maggie had mentioned earlier on, is that this is something that we spoke about at the McGill in March 2018. And Ryan Mahon is an indigenous knowledge holder, but what's also very important about Ryan is that he does podcasts. So the way we are looking at it, and he's a stand-up comedian. So the way we are looking at indigenous knowledge, or what we are learning from this, is extremely important, because the representation of indigenous knowledge has changed. And Ryan McMahon is one of the most pertinent examples in this sense, where he does things from his community which are part of, which use modern technology, which use modern ways of representation, modern narratives. And someone, and that is interesting to me, someone who has been in continuous conversation with people like Lee Marathon and others who have been pioneers in the field. So it's a very interesting sense of continuity. So the other word that I want to use over here, excuse me, is continuity, or what we understand as continuity, and what it means to have a sense of continuity. In the context of Karbi Anglong, I think it is very important to have a continuity from what was initiated by the Karbi Studies volumes and by the Karbi Studies, and also, for example, by the Karbi Lamnitamai. So it's a continuity that one is talking about. It is not a one-time effort, but it's a sustained effort that requires a certain passion. What I'm also talking about, the reason we have both of these pictures together is, of course, this is Grand Chief of Mohawk Community, who was there in McGill to give this talk about fishing rights and rights with the federal, state, and other aspects. So it also speaks about real living situations and ongoing struggles with the state that are very important, that help us understand how do we define the nation, how do we look into the idea of the nation. So these are, I think, very important aspects. And I think Ryan and Chief Simon give us very different aspects of indigenous living and indigenous being. This is, of course, we are looking at the Okanagan Valley, and something that I spoke about. If you remember, we spoke about 1989, and we spoke about how UN rights and other traditions are part of it, and we spoke about the Okanagan Valley. What's also important is this is the Okanagan Valley, and this is the center that we were talking about. This is, of course, Okanagan in British Columbia, Penticton, very small reserve that we are speaking of. And I thought this would be fun to do. Of course, I'm sure you recognize the symbol on the right-hand side, and this one is the Endocrine Center. So what I'm trying to tell here or propose here is that it is possible for the Center for Cardiac Studies to become what the Endocrine Center has become after over 30 years, 31 years, 1989, so 31 years. So it has what it has. So the Center for Cardiac Studies is, I think, going in a similar direction of creativity, indigenous agency, and resilience. And I think that is very important at this point in time. I'm showing you some spaces from the Endocrine Center, community spaces here. These are not my photographs, as you would realize, but things that are done within the community and what is happening within the community. And I think revival of lost symbols, lost stories is something that they began with. What was also very important about the Endocrine Center, because this is the Endocrine Center of Writing, it was important because it began with the idea that indigenous writers needed to write on their own terms and therefore could be published on their own terms rather than being corrected. The word corrected is with its quotes, being corrected by non-indigenous publishers who felt that the story was not being told in the correct way. You also have these different storytelling sessions with children. I think that's also a very good idea of doing it with children, and there are other communities that have known and that have engaged with it. And it tells us, and it begins with these storytelling sessions, story writing sessions that you have on the left side. Sorry. Yeah. This is, of course, something that I wanted to talk about. We have a current project at the Jadavpur University that we are doing, that my colleague, Professor Suchrita Chattopadhyay, and I are doing. And this deals with indigenous studies and looking at indigenous. And where we went was, of course, Hokkaido University in Japan, where we were looking into Ainu traditions and Ainu communities. And this was something that we tried to interact with members and activists and writers from the community. And this was something that we were very interested in. What you also have to understand is the Hokkaido University Center for Ainu and Indigenous Studies was something that came up, I think, in 2007. So it's a very, very late riser. And of course, Ainu has an entire history, which I'm not going to go into here, but this is also something that is important. This is closer in Asia, and I'm looking at indigenous studies at that point of time. I'll not try to show this, of course, but I think I have images of this as well. This is very important. This is in the Sydney Opera House in 2020. You have something which is called the Baduk Gili, which are First Nation songs, and of course during COVID-19 this has stopped. But what happened was every night there was a display on two of the sales of Sydney Opera House, and which told stories from First Nations. Stories of First Nation traditions and other ways. I'll see if I have the images. Yeah, these are two images that I could click. And these images give you an idea of First Nation stories that are told every day, and people can just go in and listen. So it also it reiterates the power of storytelling that has been denied for the longest of time. Collaborations that we've had, and some of which have been part of, which have been integral and with which Mr. Aaron has also engaged with, is of course Creation Songs. We've also had national and international networking with the Global South, and different universities that we've had collaborations with. In South Africa, in Berkeley, in Manitoba, Michigan, and other places, and Auckland, of course, St. Mary's. These are some of the places where we try to engage in collaborations with. It also gives you an idea of what is possible with different universities. So, for example, the University of Tromsø in Norway is very important. They have a wonderful Indigenous Studies program there, and some of us And I've been there, and they have had very interesting ways of looking into the world. And these are, of course, interesting ways of looking into national collaborations that are possible with respect to universities, with respect to indigenous studies that have been made possible and that have been incorporated. The point of talking about these collaborations is because I think the Center for Further Studies can also can also engage in such collaborations if it wishes on their own terms, and of course thinking in terms of indigenous knowledge systems. So these are certain possibilities that one can think about, to think in terms of certificate courses on indigeneity, maybe related to sustainability, education and environment that could be, of course, started by CKS. And of course, for us in the project, we've been thinking of an anthology of essays on indigenous studies as a deliverable that we plan to do. But also, between universities that we've been trying to exchange, there's a possibility of a combination of things that we are trying to do at the university, at JU, and also possibilities that I think CKS can engage with, whether it's Assam University or other institutions of their group. So this is a possibility that we are talking about. Right. Finally, of course, as I had mentioned, these are the images of the document have been taken from the website, and these are from the author's collection.
Okay.
The other images. So thank you very much for listening. If there are any questions, I'll be happy to respond.
Thank you so much, madam. Thank you so much. In fact, you see, considering the fact that research is let us say, it is the dirtiest word, I think it's balanced. You have really balanced your research and your representation on Karbi oral traditions so well. We thank you for that. And as you mentioned about listening, internalizing, learning, imagining, and empathizing, I think we need to learn a lot from you on this. And how I wish that we could have sat across a table and discussed about it. It would have been really wonderful. It would have been really wonderful. But anyway, we need to change according to the times that we are facing right now. Thank you, madam. Okay, then I would like to keep the floor open. I would like to keep the floor open for any question. If there is any query that you would like to ask, madam. Anyone?
Any questions? Right.
Madam, I can put up thank you notes on the chat box, but nobody is asking a question.
No, I think there is a question here. I can see a question over here.
You may answer to that, madam.
Yeah, I think there's a question by Hemjyoti, maybe. How do we address the indigenous vis-a-vis tribal as identity markers in contemporary Northeast India? I think if you're talking about the word tribal, and I think this is of course my position, whenever I'm using the word tribal, I use it in terms of constitutional word, and I don't think I have the right to use the word tribal at any point of time. What's also important over here is that I'm also interested in looking at indigenous and how one explores the word indigenous. And especially, I think, given the debates associated with COVID-19, the word indigenous has been problematized in terms of access to resources, access to healthcare, again, that have been reinforced because of these words. And of course, indigenous communities have in much of North America, for example, and also in certain cases in India as well. So if I'm able to address the question, we need to be cautious when using the word tribal. At least that is what I feel. The whole idea of looking at the word tribal has to be seen with respect to the history of discrimination that comes with the word tribal. And I think this is relevant to somebody who is a non-indigenous resident here in the field. I mean, I've had indigenous friends from indigenous communities who told that, we use the words as we feel. So I think that agency belongs to the indigenous person to decide what is best and what is the best possible way of
Yes, sir.
using the word. But for others,
और
I
ये
think-
दो
yeah.
हेलो
So, yes.
Mr.
Yeah.
Dilip, I think you need to mute your microphone. Okay.
yes I have connected my microphone yes
Please mute
yes
your
I have connected yes
No, you need to mute
okay
your
okay all right yes okay all right
Thank you. Madam, please.
Yeah. No, it's okay. So what I wanted to tell over here is that one has to, I think, take cognizance of the word tribal very cautiously. If one is a non-indigenous person, if one is an indigenous person walking in the field, the prerogative and should belong to that indigenous person to use it. Because, say, for example, that word can be used also as a sense of rebellion. It's like using a master's tool, if I may use that word. It's a very conflicting word to use because it presupposes the use of language in a certain way. It presupposes years of stereotypes that have been insisted upon within a system of writing, publication, and others. So I think that is very important. I hope that addresses your question. I think there's somebody else who wants to ask the question. Yeah. Yeah, I think, Karen, I think that's a very important question. Ram Hampi, who writes our methodology is different when applied to indigenous studies. I would certainly think that they are different when you're applying it because when you're talking, I'm very wary about using the word methodology when it comes to indigenous studies because I don't know when I'm susceptible to a process of actually looking at indigeneity from a paternalistic anthropological point of view. And how does one look into that paternalistic anthropological point of view? And I think I'm very wary of that. I have nothing against anthropology, but it has a very long history of paternalistic approaches, of looking at it in terms of, and of course, much of writing nowadays is trying to counter that. But one has to be very wary of that process. And I think when you're talking about methodology, what I would suggest that you go back to the Linda Smith book and to look at other contemporary authors as well. And what you will find is that they talk about these 25 indigenous projects, some of which talk about preserving, reclaiming, remembering, and other processes, family, community, different kinds of projects. And I think that will help us to understand that methodology. The fact that I can speak today with such ease is because these processes are happening. If you look at the earlier volumes of Karbi studies by DST, you'll find that one of the places that he tells you that Karbis are being known as peace-loving people. I think that is a very important statement that has been made here. Why? Because you're talking about an entire historicization of a process where none of the indigenous community had any say in it. Had no say in it, and you're talking about that process. And then, of course, there's this whole process of looking into colonial readings into it, including our very own Verrier Elvin. Verrier Elvin has done service to Nepal and other places, as we know, but approaches of Verrier Elvin are problematic in terms of its patronizing tone and attitude. The one thing Verrier Elvin did was that he brought these people into the so-called National Front, and I'm using that word very cautiously here. And he did that. But his approach is something that must evolve. We cannot have the same approach today. Right? Because he continued to speak for that indigenous community. And I think that was very important. He continued to speak for that indigenous community and know. So I think that is something that we have to understand. Right? All right. Okay. Next question is Lulu had a question, I think.
one from Struggle Puncture.
Struggle Bunch, okay. That's a very interesting name. But yes,
Struggler.
I would like to know how scientific knowledge to the indigenous community being imparted over generally to get a more as and exploring those. Yeah, this is something that you should have as your own project and looking at it because, see, okay, now a lot of question is coming into it. Okay, I will try to address the first part. This first part, I think, if I can address struggle puncture directly, is that if you're coming across and exploring the indigenous knowledge, I'm sure there is more to explore. And of course, a pandemic like COVID-19 tells us that has given us a complete idea of what it means to have a good track record with nature and the world around us. And I think that's very important for us to understand this process. It is something that you can do. I think Dr. Atul Puri or somebody like and all are people who have worked in this field. And I think it might be useful for you to, if I may say so, if I may take the liberty to suggest so, to talk to these people who have already worked in these areas. So there are conversations and I think one needs to engage with these conversations.
What is the status of tribal studies in India?
I'm going to address Amputh and Ampi's question after I address Lulu's question. How can the Karbi knowledge system be brought into mainstream learning? First of all, of course, Alright, okay. Okay, I need to know, is Dharam Singh not DST or is it Dharam Singh somebody else?
He's a different one.
Okay, yeah, I would think that is what I thought. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Sabi. Alright, okay, yeah, this is DST. Alright, so first of all, if I try to address Lulu's question, how can the Karbi knowledge system be brought into mainstream learning? I think one of the first things that you need to do is to introduce Karbi studies in some courses of Assam University. In some courses of Assam University and a lot of freedom. I mean, at Tirupur, till now we've had freedom and so we've been able to introduce at least some texts that I have taught during the extra departmental courses, which already some of you know about, and we've done that. We've taught courses, we've taught short stories from these sections, or narratives and others when we've done that. And I think that is possible to do so. So it's a possibility because we have the option of, and others. So it's there in the syllabus where we can include, just because we needed that freedom, we brought in this whole idea of having others, and therefore we can add these people in. And we've added that process. I think that is very important. Also, I would suggest is that one of the ways of looking into it is that, for example, in D2 and other schooling systems, is Karbi a language that is there in the optional? Is Karbi taught as a language? That is something one has to know. The other thing that we also have to know is, I think, in Karbi DTs, we don't have a gender, so how it will be addressed in a writing? I think that has already been addressed to a great extent by Mr. Teron in his Karbi Studies book, where he does talk about this question of gender and other aspects, and Hindu and other aspects, and I think one needs to read those texts as well. So, it's lesson 101 in Karbi Studies is to read all those books on Karbi Studies. I think that is lesson 101. And then you will find that you already have some of the answers. You can ask more questions thereafter. I think for the oral traditions of Karbis, I know about the present scenario of the oral traditions of Karbis. It's a little tricky for me to answer this question right now with DST sitting here. But I will still try to tell you over here because I think you will have to understand that time is very precious. Time is very precious. So all of us over here, at least many of us here, are aware of Google Karbi. And when I speak of Google Karbi, you realize that I'm speaking about a particular person. If you don't understand which it is, you should do your homework. This is for all young Karbi people who they are not understanding who I mean by saying Google Karbi. I'm not going to give you the name, you should find it out. So if you try to find that out and if you try to understand what I'm talking about, you will realize that time is very precious. And the more you talk with people around you, with friends, with community people, with your peers, I think that is one of the ways of understanding what the situation is. And to actually actively engage with projects related to Karbi studies, related to recordings, related to listening to elders, listening to reading to stories and other aspects, that is, I think, very important. The question about the status of Karbi studies, tribal studies in India is a very long question, and I think it's difficult for me to answer this in a question or answer session, but I'll try my best. What you have to understand is that much has been happening. Indigenous studies has received this big boom right now. And this has been a very big boom in indigenous studies, which has led to the development of indigeneity centers across the country. One needs to be aware of the kind of work that is happening there. And one also needs to be engaged with the idea of community and see what is possible with that community. And I think that it also addresses the question of Gitimali Goswami. Young researchers should approach the community with respect and understanding. And the understanding is very simple, that you don't know anything. One doesn't know anything. It's a very simple understanding. If you can come with that kind of understanding, rather than imparting one's own ideas on oneself, I don't think that is acceptable. One has to be in a process that you can talk about this and engage in this process. I think there are two questions about preservation. I think preservation involves constant practice, knowledge, and also listening to other indigenous communities across the world. The internet makes it very easy for us to have access to other indigenous communities. And right now, when we are doomed to be in our homes as much as possible, or working with the internet, if we have the privilege of access to it, then I think that is one of the ways of looking into it. I'll be happy to send in links which will help us explore more these things, and I can, if AST and Maggie permits and Sabine permits, that I can send these links to the email ID and you all can just circulate that. I think that there are a lot of places that one can look into it, and I think that is happening for a very, very long time, this preservation. I think a lot of preservation in terms of language, in terms of language learning, and also something that I think, for example, somebody like me does not have access to. I can understand Karbi that is spoken right now, but there has been a change in the language of Karbi, let's see, even from the 60s. To understand that, I think, is very important. Very important to understand what we can do, and just to listen, and share experiences that one has from the community. Talk to the family that is there with you. Talk and know what the stories are. Because those stories are important. Those stories are part of history that you think should be serious enough for understanding. I don't think there are any more questions. I hope I've addressed everyone's questions. Yeah. I think I have. Yeah, I think I addressed that question about how you can address other will be brought into mainstream, because we spoke about processes that are there. And the fact that we can have a conversation right now with different communities, different people around over here, and a lot of people who are there within the university system working in a particular area. So they are there in the so-called mainstream already. What's also important I think one of the first things that you learn when one works with indigenous studies is to look at the word mainstream with a lot of suspicion as well. But because who decides what is mainstream? Who decides what is mainstream and who decides what is marginal? And where is your location when you are talking about marginality and mainstream? I think that is also very important at that point of time. Any other questions?
I think we don't have any more questions coming up.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much, madam. And I'm
Thank
sure
you.
all those who have asked are satisfied with the responses that you have got from madam. Thank you, madam. I just
you.
want to ask you, if it is quite okay,
Yes.
you clearly mentioned about classroom materials that need to be redefined. Madam, will you please elaborate on this? Because this is something that we are struggling here in Karbi Anglong.
Yes, I would think so, Maggie, because I think we spoke about this when we were in Dipu as well, because teaching experiences and other looking at. Because if you, one is of course, you see there are two things that we are talking about. We are talking about a pedagogic practice which exists institutionally, bureaucratically. But within those bureaucracies, are there any spaces? Changing a syllabus involves a very long formal process, as some of us here understand. That may not be doable. But what is doable is to actually have small seminars, small workshops, small study circles, where one can try to look at a particular text from Karbi Anglong and see how it speaks or does not speak to other traditions that one is knowing. So if one is dealing with, for example, Dickens. If one is dealing with Dickens or reading Dickens, you find Dickens. So how do you connect Karbi Anglong with Dickens? You really cannot connect Karbi Anglong with Dickens so easily. But you can connect the idea of the marginality. You can connect the idea of exclusion. Right? And to see how reading changes. How has reading changed? What is the nature of reading within Karbi Anglong as well? Because as you would know that Karbi Anglong has 2 newspaper dailies as well. And these are newspaper dailies and the kind of creative writing, if any, that is possible. What's also important is, I think, the engagement with the Karbi Youth Festival that happens at one point. It's an annual event, but I think it gives us an idea to have students working on projects related to it. Working on projects related to it, and to see one way of looking at maybe comparative projects and comparative projects which deal with not only. I remember a young student from Karbi Anglong who wanted to work with the community, alright? But was told that no, you need to work with Amitabh Ghosh. Now, I have nothing against Amitabh Ghosh, very nice man, very good reading and all of that stuff. But if the person wants to work with indigenous community, that person should be given the liberty to work in, especially in Dipu. I think that is changing now with the engagement that the university has, as you and I know, has initiated for that moment, and I think that is possible. And to actually have some session beyond the rigors of class syllabus completion, which just deals with Karbi studies. I think that would help. Helping people to recognize. As you know that much of that learning has not just come from books, it has come from engagement with people in the community. That may be a mother, a brother, a sister, a friend, but that kind of engagement. That I think is a very fruitful engagement that one can have. And these are tools that one can use and things that they are. I mean, for example, if you remember when we were in that workshop together, there were intricacies of weaving that you had shown, and you told, so which would not have been visible to a casual bystander. But my question to you would be that how many within Karbi Anglong, how many young men and women within Karbi Anglong would actually have awareness of that difference? And that can only happen with a very sustained engagement. That is very important. Yeah. How can one become a good indigenous activist? It's a very, very difficult process. Linsu, and a very good question as well. It's a very typical process because it involves a lot of struggle, a lot of fighting, and a lot of perseverance. It requires the ability to stand for one's rights, even if the world does not believe you. I think that ability to stand for one's rights is not something that is unknown at the moment. It's something that all of us are aware of right now. It is not something that is not happening anymore. There are already people before you who have done that. So I think if one remembers that, that is also a possibility. Maggie, I hope I addressed your question as well.
Yes, madam. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you.
We'll work on it, and obviously we would be requiring your guidance also on this, madam.
Thank you. I'll be happy to. Yes.
And
Thank you.
thank you to all those who have, queried madam
Pona, 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 pona.
questions, and I'm sure your doubts have been cleared. Now we move on to the vote of thanks. So I request our director of Center for Karbi Studies, Mr. Dharam Singh Deron, to share a few words with us and also to propose the vote of thanks. Sir, please.
Thank you so much, Debasri, for accepting our request at very short notice to speak to us. And it's been a pleasure to have you with us all every time that we had met on other occasions in the past. So it's a story which goes back at least 12 years from today. So you came to DIFU first in 2008 to
9 February.
Okay, all right.
Yes, very strict DST. I remember. Go ahead.
Okay, so I hope you will not mind asserting my seniority because now I'm beyond 60, and I find many young people joining us in this conversation, and I see a lot of people participating from different parts of the country. I thank all of them. This is the platform in this kind of serious kind of situation all over the country, all over the world, in fact, where people are always advised, or rather, terrorized to stay home and be safe. But I think, in spite of all these lockdowns and the so much of crisis that humanity has been facing of late, we have got under this virtual meeting place where we can communicate in larger number. I think today, it was about 100. I think so, about 100 participants were here, and then constantly maybe there are about 80 people who had been participating, who had been online with us. I thank you all for your time. And actually, this Center for Karbi Studies, as the name itself suggests, that we have been trying to, catch up with whatever lost time. As Debasri had told us that indigenous studies has undergone a very, very, some kind of a boom. It's good to know that, yes, all across the country, everybody is talking about going back to their roots, and that naturally is actually going indigenous. So I think we are late, but we are not so late. And then as Debasri had, I think, very correctly observed, that we have produced a lot of materials, mostly in Karbi and a little in Assamese, and also a little in some other languages like Hindi, and then also a few in English. There are questions like, I think I can still see Linso asking, how can one become a good indigenous activist? I think, I think I'm not a good example, but I can tell something about my own example because it takes all of yourself to become a good indigenous activist, and then uh, I would always prefer to be an activist, and uh, in my own activist days, I have seen how, I mean, it's always uncertain what will happen next. Nobody knows. And in the course of last about 40 years of my activism, I had been part of Karbi Youth Festival. I had been part of Autonomous State Demand Committee movement. We clashed with the police. We clashed with the state. And the state suppressed us. And so many people of the movement had suffered jail terms. They had to go to they had to go in hiding and things like that. So there was disruption in family life, personal life, and then so many things happened. So I think, in spite of this, I think I blame nobody for what I am today, and I think the experiences, my the youth festival experience and the SDC movement experiences, they all contributed to what I am today. And then I there was a time when people tend to be partisan, but I think an activist has to be open to all kind of ideas and all kind of currents. There are so many currents, some you may like, some you may not like, but then I think that will harden you, that will make you more focused, and then I think more committed. And then I think that is the lesson that I got in the last 40 years of my activism as a student and as part of a political party, and now as whether I liked it or not, it was not the kind of life that maybe some 40 years ago I visualized for myself. But I think I'm happy that now since 2008, the Karbi studies, the idea of Karbi studies came in 2008, and we were not aware in 2008 that it was exactly 100 years. The Mikir, I think those who are aware of the Karbi studies will also know about something about the Mikirs. This was the first colonial ethnography. It was edited by Charles Lyell in 1908. It appeared in 1908. And, it was such a coincidence that, people like, my juniors, most of them were students, and someone were activists in the Karbi Lamera Mai, Karbi Literary Organization, and then some students, and some were managing blogs in the Google, and then that's how we met, and then we thought of bringing out Karbi studies, and in hindsight now, as if everything was planned. The colonial ethnography, the first ethnography, and I think the only ethnography by, the colonial authors, that was produced in 1908, and it took 100 years for us, indigenous writers, to come up with something like Karbi studies. Now there are, 4 volumes of Karbi studies, and then I think such kind of work can only be done by activists, because one has to be very open, and then one can be critical against anybody and anyone. And then I think what we need now is, we have so much materials. We have produced so much of materials in Karbi. Now we have to, we have to come together to put them up in academic language, in scholarly language, if within codes. We'll have to we'll have to design our own kind of language. And then as Debasri had said, there is no mainstream, and then mainstream within codes. So who is mainstream and who is not, that should not be decided by some kind of force. So that is the challenge that we have before Karbi scholars and then Karbi activists. And then I think we have now more than 30 PhD degree holders among Karbi students, or Karbis. I think that's a good number, because this number came up only maybe in the span of last 5 or 6 years, and it happened maybe only after the establishment of a local university here, Assam University Difu campus, and then we have a lot of things to do. But I think, as Debasri had I think mentioned, I'm very hopeful and confident with new PhD scholars joining the rank. I think that will not be a very difficult task for us to do. The only thing is we have those materials have to be put in the language that we want to, and then create our own curriculum, and then introduce it on our own, and then let the university wait for us. But in the meanwhile, we should go ahead with our own curriculum, and then start the work. I think that's the only thing that we have to do. And then I think in Northeast, this may be because of my own poverty of knowledge, but I think in Arunachal University, they have a full-fledged tribal studies, and then they call it Arunachal Institute of Tribal Studies, and it was established in 1995, and they have a full curriculum where you can also offer PhD. So I think now we have tribal studies in Assam University, Difu campus, and that has to be activated. And then also, I don't know the situation in Guwahati University or Tezpur or Dibrugarh, but I think this is something which all the tribal communities, all the indigenous communities in Northeast, I shouldn't be the one to advise, because we haven't been able to do anything, but I think this is what we can do. And I think we are the least researched people in the entire country, I should say so. And I think it's not that worrisome from one point of view, because so far the kind of so-called academic writings that we come across on Karbi are actually so much of misrepresentation and so much of that kind of colonial kind of writing, and then we have a lot to writing back to do, but instead of responding one-on-one, I think we should go ahead with the Center for Karbi Studies or a Karbi Studies curriculum, a full-fledged curriculum. And I think this is possible only when the young scholars and then young activists realize this, and then actually take the responsibility. I think we have had the best opportunity of having Debasri, because I have known her since 2009, and then we have collaborated since then. And then I think she asked me to speak to the students of Berkeley University when she was a visiting lecturer there, visiting professor there. So I had the opportunity to talk a little bit about the Karbi culture, and then how the situation is here in Karbi Anglong in India, and what it means to be a Karbi. So I think she has been promoting Karbi studies, and also giving us her valuable feedbacks. And then now I think we are more confident to go ahead And I think with our friends through Debasri, we have now. I mean, we are closer now through virtual meetings like that. I think I would request Debasri to.
We have another one coming up.
Yes, yes, and then on 7 September we have another webinar coming up, which will be organized by uh,
Jane.
Jadavpur University Canadian Studies, right?
Yes.
Yes,
I will send the poster today.
yes. Yeah. Thank you so much. And then I think we will, with your cooperation, with your guidance, I think we can also have virtual meetings with indigenous scholars, including
Yes,
that.
we can circulate
Yes, yes.
from across the world.
Yes, yes. Hawaiian scholars, and then Maori scholars, and then also Native American
Yeah.
scholars. I think in the
Yeah.
next 4 or 5 months to come, I think.
Yeah, we're all doomed at home right now, so
Yes.
we might as well make this
Yes, yes.
if we can.
Yeah, I think.
We will.
Yeah, I think we are almost at the end of the time, and we are very excited to have you. Thank you once again on behalf of Center for Karbi Studies, and also all friends who have joined us. I think this is the first meeting, online meeting, virtual meeting. I hope we can continue to meet and enrich our understanding of the indigenous studies and indigenous world. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.